Welcome to the YSU Career Conversations podcast. My name is Dr. Justin Edwards with the Office of Career Exploration and Development. Today we're here for the STEM panel, and we're really excited about that. This YSU podcast is about career choices and the unexpected changes that we make along the way. I'm joined today by Carla Matusi and then a panel of STEM alumni to talk about those experiences. Carla, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Justin. Excited to have everybody with us today on our panel. We have Bill Ruggles, we have Jennifer Miller, and Christy Yazbek.
All right, so I think what we're going to start by doing is we'd like each of our guests to introduce yourself, give a brief overview of what your degree was at YSU and how you've then used that in your professional career thus far. Bill, do you want to start?
Sure. So I graduated in 2000 with a Bachelor of Engineering in Civil Engineering. And then I came back and got my master's degree in 2003 from YSU in Civil Engineering. So I'm currently a structural engineer and project manager for MS Consultants in Youngstown, and I've been there for the last 22 years since I graduated.
Cool. I can go next. Hi, I'm Christy. I graduated in 2015 with a bachelor's in applied math, and then I did the 4+1 program in economics. So in an extra year, I did my master's and graduated in 2016. Since then, I've been working at Progressive Insurance. I've had a bunch of different roles. I started as a pricing analyst, moved on to an events coordinator in marketing, and then a CRM supervisor for resource planning. And most recently, I am now the associate manager of data analysis, which arguably is where I use the most of my math degree and has been really great to really make use of it.
Christy, I'm so excited that you work at Progressive Auto Insurance. And Crystal knows this, and Carla knows this, and people in our office know about this, but we always talk about an idea called flow when we work with exploratory students, right? And when we bring it up on the screen in orientation, we say, what does the word flow make you think about? And inevitably, someone says that lady from Progressive Auto Insurance. So we've got a good connection there.
I'm so glad.
We'll talk more about
Yes,
flow.
almost like a brand.
Yeah, not flow from Progressive. We'll talk about the idea of flow and how that impacts decision making.
It's wonderful.
Yes, thanks for being here.
So my name is Jennifer Miller, and I graduated in 2016 with my bachelor's degree in chemistry, then went out to Penn State and got my PhD in physical chemistry. And then just recently, starting in the fall, I actually got hired back at YSU, and I'm now working as a lecturer and research scientist. So I have a pretty unique role, kind of joint appointment between the chemistry department as a lecturer and then the Division of Labor and Workforce Development as a research scientist, working with some local industry partners like Ultium Batteries and GM to work on developing some of their educational materials, Battery 101 courses, things like that for training sort of the next generation of workforce.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody again for that. And what's really kind of interesting is you started with where you are now, but as anybody who's listened to the Career Conversations podcast in the past understands that we like to go back to the beginning. So it's appropriate that you're here at YSU because a lot of the direction we're going to ask you about is how you got to where you are today. And podcasts, as we know, are hot right now. A lot of people are getting their information from podcasts, and this is no exception. So it's interesting with alumni. There was a recent article within the Chronicle of Higher Education, and it talked about the differences between student intentions and career-related activities. And the highest, if you will, sort of successful interaction that the students in this article noted was networking with alumni or professionals. So Justin, I don't know if you had a chance to read that, but that's at 70%, followed by interviewing and shadowing at 77%, and discussing career with a faculty member. So, we kind of have a mix of that at this table, but I think maybe we'll start with you, Bill. Could you kind of give a little bit of a idea of what it felt to be like back at campus today? What were your thoughts on what changed, and where did your memories go when you walked on to YSU today?
Well, campus has definitely changed a lot since 2000 and even 2003 when I last graduated or took classes here. And my first thought, I guess, took me back to some of my first classes. I took the introductory level classes, even when I wasn't really sure which branch of engineering I wanted to go into. So I know those classes were very important to my career choice. And then after my freshman year, I had an intro to engineering course, which really helped me decide between mechanical engineering and civil engineering. And at that point, I decided to choose civil engineering, and that was pretty much the main decision maker for me.
Okay. So what we kind of hear you saying is that introductory classes played a pivotal role in how you then proceeded within that engineering genre. So you knew you wanted to be there, but you didn't know quite which direction to go into. Okay, so that's a good start.
Well, I want to add to that too, because one of the things that, as people listen to this in the future, we might have those exploratory students who are, considering something within STEM, right? And so we didn't even talk about this. What does STEM stand for, Carla?
Oh boy, I want to say science, technology, engineering, and math.
Correct.
If I'm right.
A+, absolutely.
There you go.
You didn't know you needed a quiz.
No, I didn't.
On recording today. And even students who lean towards something within that bucket of science, technology, engineering, and math, and many of the intro classes in class like YSU 1500, they're going to have a chance to explore that interest and engage in assessment tools and kind of refine that interest. And it sounds, Bill, like that's part of what you did, was you knew you had that interest in engineering and that pathway, and that was refined throughout some of those introductory courses, which is good to hear.
Yeah, in fact, Wim, our dean, he recently told me that students, when they come in, they're encouraged to be undecided engineering until they actually take that introductory course and kind of learn more about the different options or aspects of each.
Well, there's so much value too, because right, it's kind of almost transferring that idea of indecision into open-mindedness, right? We want students as they come in to be open to learning about what's here and trying to find that best fit for them. So that's such a good way to think about it, is we want you to sort of be undecided as you start, and then let's find a really good path that fits you well. So I love that.
Okay. So maybe we could go next with Jennifer. Out of curiosity, I know that it probably looked a little bit different, since you were a student, but what kind of things did you notice, and where did your thoughts go when you walked on campus?
Sure. So I've noticed every single time I've come back to campus, because I've gotten to come back a couple times between graduating and actually starting work here. And every time I came back on campus, something was different. Rooms have been updated. Ward Beecher's been really completely updated with just, paint and different furnishings and things like that. Which may not seem like a huge deal, but it's just so nice to see just a fresh look on campus. And then, of course, the, construction around the campus and the roadways being different. I just feel like it has a fresh look, and I've just noticed even that excitement infusing onto campus more as we see more and more students coming from really a greater regional area. Even when I was here, the majority of students were sort of from the Tri-County area, and now we're seeing more and more coming from further away, which I think is just a testament to what YSU is doing both in outreach and retention of students.
Yeah, and Justin, I don't know if this is still the correct percentage, but we're ranked 7th in the United States in terms of, I believe, tuition.
I'm gonna fail my quiz on the air. I do not know if that number is correct, but we will find out.
I believe it is, but yeah, that's one of the reasons, the quality of the education, and what you can get. So I don't know if any of you also noticed the Y branding of the different physical Ys for selfies. That's one thing that I think in the past year has made a big difference too, is the initial branding. So
we have our fact checker here saying,
oh, good.
We are number 7.
Indeed,
okay.
Indeed. I love it. Thank you.
Well, in terms of the look of campus too, I joke about this often, but I feel like I need to record it so that it's here for posterity in the future. Is I feel like that one of the best changes we've made on campus is burying the electric wires on Wick Avenue.
Yes,
oh my goodness,
true.
Right? It looks so much more like a university town driving up Wick Avenue now, with those lamp posts and the electric wires being underground. So the look and feel of campus.
The aesthetics, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then Christy, if you can top that, what are your thoughts on, really when you walked on campus? I think there's a sense of nostalgia for alumni, and I think our thoughts go back to where we once were, and almost, thinking of the people and how we grew as a person. So could you talk a little bit about how you felt YSU's helped you grow in your career, and what were your thoughts when you walked on campus today?
Yeah, for sure. I know my fellow panelists gave these wonderful examples of what they thought, and I embarrassingly just looked for the food. I realized it was around noon. I normally ate lunch around then. So the sense of nostalgia did come back for that Butler Cafe. I forgot they're closed on Mondays. So I awkwardly pulled on the doors, and then they were locked, and I pretended like I meant to do that. Turned around, came back up to Kolkali, and could smell the fries. Honestly, that was a big thing that made me nostalgic for YSU. Yeah. So I used to live in Cafaro. So I ate all my meals here. And that was when I had most of my social interaction with all of my friends. And also, actually, a lot of the times we would study during those breaks. So we would come down here, and especially in Kokali, we'd sit in Chick-fil-A was here my last year, so that was great. The Butler, we'd go to all these different places. And one of the things that we would always talk about is, hey, yeah, we have all these great classes, but what are we doing with them? In STEM, especially in math, there are a lot of different tracks you can take, and a lot of people don't realize that there's traditional, applied, actuarial science, and many more than that. You're told that, and I was speaking to a few lovely ladies here before, you're told that a woman in math can do anything, but nobody tells you what those things are. So that was definitely something that we would always talk about. And I know YSU definitely helped me prepare. I went to a lot of these conversations, a lot of development conversations, to think about what I actually wanted to do with my degree. And especially if I don't use it right away in my career, how will I eventually use it? And I think that was really important for me.
Yeah, that sounds like, that concept of having a plan, but being open to change.
Absolutely.
And that's where this podcast really was developed in terms of what we wanted to talk about. You mentioned, the different dining, and it's interesting, President Tressel has often said that one of the main things the students gave feedback on in terms of what they wanted was a change in dining, and that's how Chipotle arrived on our campus. So, we're all kind of joking about it, but I think you bring the point of, the comfort level and how a student feels when they are on campus. Mm-hmm. I also like how you brought up, what do you do with these classes, or how could this be applicable? So, referring back to the Chronicle of Higher Education article, they reviewed and they sort of surveyed students on general career building activities. All of these things we have within our office right now. 63% said that they've gotten benefit from a career fair. A career exploration course, 57% of the students surveyed. We also have career exploration courses. Career profiles or assessments, 67%. So, these are different opportunities that current students can use on our campus. But we'd also like to know a little bit on what your thoughts were of what worked for you. So, Bill, we'll start with you. What did you find to be the most effective way to gain insight into your likes and dislikes while you were attending YSU?
Well, while I was attending YSU, I think just the different courses that I took, because for engineering, we had to take courses in mechanical engineering, industrial engineering, chemical, and environmental. So you got a pretty good idea during the course of those courses, mm-hmm. whether or not you would like a particular subject matter or not. And I think that's the main way that I figured it out.
Was it difficult for you, or was it almost like a little bit of a light bulb moment?
Kind of a light bulb, maybe not all at once light bulb, but I know.
A flicker.
Yeah, flicker. But, I knew, there were certain classes like statics that I liked more than maybe like, circuits, which is an electrical engineering course, so. Okay.
Well, that brings us maybe now to what your thoughts were, because, we haven't really gotten into, the person who maybe didn't know right away. So I'm curious to see if either of you had that experience. What was your experience?
Yeah, honestly, I was friends with a lot of engineers, and I was always really jealous that they got that experience to try all these different classes and know, hey, I like chemical over mechanical, because in math, if you really genuinely like real analysis or abstract algebra, good for you, but become a professor because they don't actually apply that much to real life. It's just teaching you a new way to think. So those math classes were amazing for your mental ability. But when you're thinking about what can I do with this, you have to think a little bit harder. So classes like statistics, it was the first time I took operations research that I realized I really like the applied part. So that's when I started looking for roles specifically in the data analysis field. So for any math people out there that don't know what's open, search data analyst for any company, they exist.
Okay, thank you. And same question will go to you, Jennifer.
Yeah, so I was kind of one of those ones that changed my trajectory. So I entered in as a pre-pharmacy major, and I'm kind of an all or nothing person. So I didn't know what I wanted to do in high school, but you just kind of draw something out of the hat. You're like, chemistry was cool. I like people, we'll do pharmacy. So I, had a 10-year plan. I knew what I needed to do to get into pharmacy school, had it all figured out. And then I started taking classes, really enjoyed my classes, started shadowing at pharmacies, come back to that, and then started doing research actually in the chemistry department through the Choose Ohio First Scholarship Program. Basically, they said, hey, you work with a chemistry faculty, do some research, we'll give you a scholarship. No one's going to turn that down. And so I'm doing research, which I didn't know what research was, but jumped into that, and I'm shadowing at pharmacies. And pharmacy is a fantastic field. If you like it, good for you. But I would stand at the pharmacies and watch the clock, and that clock had never moved so slowly than in those few hours when I would be there. And then I would be in the lab at YSU, and my professor would literally have to kick me out and be like, please go home. Like, you're okay. You did a lot today. Like, go home. I realized I loved it. So something that I didn't even know existed as a career field opened up to me just through getting involved in my department and through talking to faculty. That was probably the most impactful part of my entire career arc, my entire journey, was the mentorship that I got from faculty. And that's one thing I can't emphasize enough, is talk to your faculty members. As a current faculty member, I can say talking to students is my favorite part of my job. So many students don't come because they don't want to be a bother or they don't know what they don't know, but you don't know what you don't know until you have that conversation. And so those conversations and that hands-on experience for me were the most pivotal part of really changing my career from pharmacy into graduate school, more the research track.
Yeah, and Justin, I'll kind of bring it back to you because I know you have a very high interest in flow. So would you like to maybe take this opportunity to talk about that experience through her eyes?
Yeah, I was going to say, you set this up perfectly. So let's come back to the idea of flow, not from progressive, but flow, actually originally through the lens of some research with creativity is where this idea has first come from. Psychological research related to what it means to be creative and put out content. The best way that we define flow is it's that moment where an hour can fly by like 5 minutes. Right? It sounds like that was the lab, the research experiences for you. And then there's that other side of the coin where 5 minutes drags on and feels like an hour, right? It sounds like that was the shadowing in the pharmaceutical types of settings, right? So shadowing's an important part of this because for you, it helped you realize before you got all the way into pharmacy school that wasn't the environment that excited you, because we put a huge emphasis in our culture on following your passion, but passion doesn't always kind of manifest the same in different environments, or things we like don't always feel the same in a professional setting versus in a setting where we kind of are thinking about something that we like. So I think shadowing is really important for students to try out that flow and see if it fits. I'll throw it back maybe all the way to Bill. Can you think of like shadowing experiences outside of the classroom, hands-on experiences that helped you refine that career path as you move through your curriculum at YSU?
Yeah, I was pretty lucky. My summer of my junior year, I was able to do an internship with ODOT, where I got to work out in the field on construction projects. So that was something that was some really good experience. I never actually really got to job shadow, I guess, necessarily, but I strongly recommend job shadowing to all the students, even before they go to college, and obviously during college, just to help them get a better idea of what they want to do with their lives and see if a particular career is something that might interest them.
Yeah. And those internships are, such a really good part of the opportunity students have to get course credit and engage in the field. You said ODOT. I want to make sure that for especially exploratory students listening, they know what that means. Can you tell a little bit more about what that looked like and what ODOT stands for?
ODOT's actually the Ohio Department of Transportation, and actually a pretty big client of my company now, MS Consultants. We do a lot of work with ODOT and a lot of construction projects. In fact, we were partnered on this Fifth Avenue project out here by the Stambaugh Stadium recently.
Absolutely. Good experiences. Those internships are huge. Carla, I'll kick it back over to you. What kind of questions? Where do you want to go next?
Yeah, so you're listening to Career Conversations podcast here at Youngstown State University. And for those of you, if you're just joining us, we're here with a panel of STEM alumni. And we're kind of talking a little bit about, first impressions back on campus and kind of walking a little bit down memory lane and tying that back into what has helped through their development at Youngstown State University, whether it be through classes or internships. Everything that everybody said today, really coincides with the article from the Chronicle of Higher Education, the recent article titled New Pathways from College to Career, because, it talks about the ones that bumped up to the 70s from the survey was discussing career with a, faculty member, which Jennifer mentioned, the interview or shadow. We call it the informational interview in our office. And then obviously all three of you fall into this category, networking with alumni or professionals. So, really, it's nice to have that direct feedback. So there may be people listening, or there may be students who are at the point where they're kind of ready to job search or think about taking some internships. And oftentimes I think we're so used to giving people advice about what to do. I'd like to reverse that question and ask maybe what experiences you had that you could share on what you learned not to do. So for example, and any of the three can take this question, what is the best way to decide if you should take a job because you need it versus waiting until one is offered closer to actually what you want to do?
We're hitting you with the tough ones.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a perfect answer for that, but I think, for me, so I graduated in 2021 with my PhD when there were basically no jobs because of the pandemic. And I was thinking about what I wanted. And I realized that for me, a huge priority was getting to move back closer to my family. And so I made the, honestly on paper, insane decision to limit my geographical location search on a job search in a time when there were no jobs. And I sat down with my advisor and I waited for her to tell me, you are insane and you're going to ruin your career if you do this. And instead she looked at me and she said, what it sounds like to me is your time here has taught you what really matters to you, and it's going to be so much better for you to take a job where you wake up every day happy with where you live, happy with your quality of life, and happy doing a job, even if it's not exactly what you want to do, than to wake up somewhere else in the country, missing out on your top priority to do something that you think is going to benefit your career. So for me, I limited my job search. There were a couple jobs I managed to apply for, did get a couple offers. I was very fortunate in that, and I do genuinely love my job. And so I don't have any complaints. I don't feel like I missed out. But I will say, if it comes down to what you quote unquote should be doing versus what your gut instinct tells you you're going to be happy with, just do what you think is going to make you happy and know your priorities, because so many people I've watched sacrifice personal satisfaction over what they think is going to get them ahead in their career, but then they're miserable and they don't have top productivity because they're frustrated with where they've funneled themselves into, and then they feel stuck. The reality is the job market is fluid. If I wanted to go get a job in, somewhere else in the country tomorrow, it might take some work. I might have to apply and do interviews. I might have to switch fields a little bit, but if I really want to be somewhere else or doing something else, I can. You're not really as stuck as what you think you are because you take a step in one direction. And so I would say don't be hesitant to take a step just because you're not sure if it's the perfect step.
I like that a lot. And that the cultural change too between expectations for how long people are going to stay in jobs has shifted so much, right? A couple decades ago, it was much more expected that if you were in a position, you were staying there for 10, 15, 20 years, or like maybe the bulk of someone's career. Whereas now, like you said, I think you said that it's just more fluid, right? So, seasons of our life can be defined by very different types of job duties or job tasks as we refine what we like. And something that is so important to point out too is the word career is much more broad than just how we get a W-2, right? It involves the life and the auxiliary factors about where we want to be and community service, and kind of how we paint that picture of who we are as a human, really, just as much as who that primary employer is. And those are good pieces of feedback too.
Yeah. And Jennifer and Justin, if I may add to that, what you've talked about is something that is of a personal experience, which is why we do these panels. Because it's almost as though when you were talking, I could visualize and kind of imagine that conversation. And there's so many different things in there, but if we could pull out what that conversation was about, it may be the connection between self-awareness and values. And sometimes when we talk to our students, we talk to them about researching job salary or location. But what should also and can be included in that conversation is, what do you value? An example of that is, where do you want to work? Why do you want to work? And now with the recent uptick in remote job opportunities, it includes how you want to work. So YSU, Youngstown State University, has a discount partnership with an organization online called FlexJobs. FlexJobs is the leader in remote work job searching. And, that brings us to the point that they did a survey where they said by 2027, 1 in 4 jobs full-time will be offered remotely. Mm-hmm. So with that having been said, this is a wonderful topic for podcast. And I think this might be a good time to sort of, bring this up. How do you feel your role has changed? And what are your thoughts on the idea of working from where you are productive?
Yeah, COVID-19 has definitely changed my workplace drastically. Almost in an instant, we had a whole office full of folks working remotely for months on end, and now we're back to sort of a hybrid working condition. But it's interesting, one of the reasons I chose to work so close was just because I didn't want to have to drive to Cleveland or Pittsburgh to work. So I chose to work in Youngstown for, less salary. But nowadays with remote work, you could literally work for a company in California or Texas, wherever, from, your own home. It's really changed the whole dynamics of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Progressive actually just allowed us to go back today after 2 years without masks or social distancing. Okay. Today is the first day. January 31st, we could go back with masks and social distancing, but we were remote for almost a full 2 years. And for me personally, it was hard. I really enjoy the people interaction. I became a manager of 7 analysts when I didn't meet them for over a year, which was really rough. So I think we're moving more to a hybrid model, just like Bill, which will be very helpful. But this kind of ties back to something I was going to mention when Jennifer was talking. Knowing what you want to do that makes you happy is amazing. But I read a really interesting article that was, if you don't know what you're passionate about yet, and I kind of fall into that category. I've done a lot of different jobs and I don't really know what I want to do the rest of my life yet. Make sure that you have a job that allows you to do other things that you're passionate about. And working remotely can be something like that. If you want to live in a certain place, it is a buyer's market right now. So you can go out and really sell yourself to get different jobs in different areas, even if you're not living in them. And that's a really powerful thing that has never happened before. So I'm really interested to see how this new generation of the workforce takes that and embraces it.
Yeah, so since I was still in grad school, kind of at the height of everything, that was definitely a big adjustment it was my last year in grad school, and I actually really needed to be in lab so that I could get the data that I needed to graduate. So being like a remote grad student was probably one of the most stressful experiences of my life because the job market was in shambles. I had restricted access to lab, and I was just like, I'm going to get stuck in grad school forever. Thankfully, that didn't happen. But now, actually in the workforce, having sort of those hybrid options, I do like it. I'm kind of like Christy said, I'm really a people person, so I prefer to be around people. And then just being in education, students don't want to get on a Zoom call or on, a WebEx call or whatever it is and ask questions. They like that face-to-face interaction. And so I think for teaching, it really is great that we're back in person because, educators across the board did a phenomenal job of working with what they had, but I think everyone breathed a big collective sigh of relief when we got to go back in person because it's just hard to engage students through a screen. It's so easy to just zone out when you're just watching someone talk on a screen. And so getting to be back to that place of interaction, I think, is super important for some job roles. But it is nice, if you're just course prepping or doing things that's on a laptop, there's not really a compelling reason to have to be in the office. And so I think employers realizing, hey, the whole world went home for like a year and things mostly kept chugging along was a good realization that there can be a little bit more flexibility in employment options and things aren't going to just crash and burn to the ground. So I think some realization of flexibility is a good thing that came out of the whole situation.
Yeah, those are some wonderful thoughts because, it opens up a dynamic. I've heard the term said that, the toothpaste is out of the tube. It's hard to get it pushed back in. So what it does is it kind of brings it to light. You know what I mean? And
we've got the STEM panel. This is the group that can figure out how to.
That's right. We have an engineer, so he could probably do it better than I. Yes, and every morning I listen to WYSU. And I know Gina Marinelli does the Doing Good series and different things like that. But one time I was thinking, gosh, for years you would hear the dialogue, oh, it's terrible. This person loves Youngstown because we're very family orientated here, but they have to move to get a job. And I think my number one thought with flexible work and or quote remote work is that family orientated person now has the option to be Youngstown, the Youngstown person that they are, which we all know a lot of times, oftentimes means staying close to family. Mm-hmm. So for me, that's one dynamic that flexible work has brought up. With all these wonderful things, I think we should keep going, Justin. So kind of along these lines, we've all talked a little bit about graduate school. What do you think are the right reasons and the wrong reasons for going to graduate school?
I'll start. So I actually, while I was in grad school, I ran a program for undergraduates called Grad School 101. And on my first slide, I would say, if you think going to grad school is going to make you a lot of money, don't go to grad school. That is not a compelling reason. On the other side, maybe you will be able to step into more career advancement, but sometimes people just choose to go to grad school because they don't know what else to do. And grad school is not a cushy place to land while you figure out life. It's really hard. It's super rewarding. And there's people that start to go to grad school and then realize it's not for them. And you can definitely pivot to other things. But, if your sole purpose in going to grad school is, well, I'm just going to do something that's not super hard while I kind of figure out my life. I mean, there's a lot of things that I would do other than a PhD program if I wanted something kind of cushy to land on. Just because it's very rewarding, but it's kind of, you've got to know why you're there. You don't have to know your 15-year plan. You don't need to know the exact industry you want to land in, but you have to have some motivation for why you're getting out of bed in the morning, just because there are exciting days in grad school and days where you love it and days where you sit there and question why you're there. And if you don't have an answer on those tough days, it's really hard to stick it out when there are other more lucrative options than grad school?
Yeah, I did grad school because it was only an extra year. And I was still in my undergrad, and I thought if I leave now, I'm never coming back. So I wanted to do it right then. The extra year was fine, but I specifically chose economics because I wanted to make myself more versatile. So I was in math. I wanted something that I could really apply, and I was loving my operations research, the statistics kind of side, and doing economics specifically for me helped me get my job. I was able to talk about different topics when I was in my interviews that the interviewers really enjoyed hearing about. As only a student, honestly, you're going against some other people that already have career experience. It's difficult. So for me, the reason was it was actually going to help me get this job. I am now managing some analysts that are thinking about going back to grad school, but kind of like Jennifer said, just because they think A, they'd get a big pay bump, or B, they can't do a certain job in progressive without it. And it's not true. So, I mean, sure, you get a little pay bump if you get a master's, but the research that you have to do to see what kind of job you want, most of these people want to become product managers and think they need an MBA. And there are plenty of different career paths that can get you to that exact same job. You just need to be a little bit more creative with how you want to get there. So if you're doing it just because you think you have to, probably not the best reason.
Thank you, Christy.
Yeah, I would agree that certainly don't want to go back to grad school just for the money. I chose to come back to YSU because it was, for one thing, it was very convenient because I worked nearby, so I was able to get here really quick. But it's really not a requirement for someone in my profession, engineer, to have that master's degree unless someone was interested in going back and getting their doctorate and maybe becoming a professor and teaching.
Yeah, so, this is interesting in talking about the timing even, because we all know that the career is now extended into the 60s and 70s. So this is based a lot on retirement and age of living and so forth. So maybe, grad school is part of your plan, but it's part of your later plan. So education is oftentimes a career pivot for those in their 50s or 60s who maybe did something for 30, 40 years and now are going back to teach about it. So what's interesting with the question of graduate school is oftentimes that answer changes as we age. Because years ago, it might have been, full-time employment to retirement. But now it might go from full-time employment to part-time and then retirement. So there's this 10-year space. Would you not say that, this could also be part of the plan? So with graduate school, those are very good questions and very honest answers that hopefully will help some of our students. Would you like to perhaps add a thought to that, Justin?
Christy, you mentioned, when you went for your master's, the economics, it helped to diversify. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something I'd like to tap into a little bit, is the diversification of skill sets. And students that work with me in our exploratory program, they often hear me talk about my background. I started at YSU as a pre-med major. And the only thought process that went into that was, I got good grades in math and science in high school, so I'll do pre-med. So I ended up finishing my undergraduate with a general studies degree in communication and chemistry. A little bit of STEM background there. And then ended up going for a master's in counseling. So I often joke that, I just wanted to gather all the majors that started with the letter C: communication, chemistry, counseling. And looking back on it, though, that ability to diversify, I've found to be really valuable for myself. And I can identify with the panic of, a doctoral study during the pandemic, because I submitted my first draft of my dissertation the week we all got sent home. Oh. It actually worked out because my dissertation committee, turns out they had nothing better to do than to get me good feedback. So it worked out in my benefit there. But speaking to diversification, can you just speak a little bit more to how you got to wanting to do that, and then how that's benefited you?
Sure. First of all, Justin, that's awesome that you made all those changes. But yeah, I think When I was still in my undergrad, I was actually going to end up finishing college a little early. So I was going to be done in 3.5 years. And I had the option to continue on a master's in math, and I really enjoyed math, but I felt at that point that I had a really good basis for careers, for most of the careers that I would be looking into. And I didn't really pick my head up out of the books a lot. So I could tell you how to like prove that -1 is negative, but I couldn't actually tell you much about what's going on in the world, which is why I thought economics would be such a good touch for me. And funny enough, all the people that were doing their masters with me, most of them were economics majors, and they were really, really great at the, I want to say the process side, but they were great at the words, at the paragraphs, at everything they had to write and talk about the economy, and I sucked at that. I was much better at the math side, so we were able to really help each other, and that connection, I still talk to a lot of those people today, that connection that we made there, learning from each other, not even just from our professors, but from each other, made such a difference in how I thought about things. And we talked a lot about like risk, being risk averse, being risk seeking, and that is the insurance world. Who knew? So when I went to interview for an insurance position, that was huge. I did an internship with Department of Homeland Security, and knowing the economy in that way as well was exceedingly helpful. So it's interesting that people think economics is a very broad area, and it is. But if you really want to get to something specific in any field, you can. You just have to find it.
Well, it sounds like in your anecdote that there's some level of happenstance in your story, right? Because building experiences, focusing on your strengths, things that you're good at, things that you're enjoying doing, and kind of just letting those snowball, if you will, to find a pathway that works. And I think it really comes back to the whole idea of this podcast is helping people understand that, you know, we can build goals and we can follow becoming an expert in the field, even if we aren't exactly sure where we might land.
Absolutely. I feel like you can be a jack of all trades in a lot of things. And I know a lot of people who are very successful at my company that did a little bit of everything well and then do one thing super, super well.
Yes.
And that's huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead, Bill.
I was able to take some business courses and also a project management course, which was so helpful in my career during my master's program. So I thought that was a huge bonus for me.
Yeah, the business side of things, it was interesting. I was talking to a cousin of mine who's a pediatrician, and he once said to me he wishes he would have taken a business minor as a pre-med student, because in medical, his field, oftentimes you're sharing an office or partnering, and you have to do all that background that's really business related. So kudos to the business minor at YSU as well. We also have an entrepreneurship minor and certificate within the business school. And with both of those opportunities, there's actually a internship paid that you can do. So think about that. You could have a minor in entrepreneurship and pair that with any major at YSU. So if you're just joining us, we're here with Bill Ruggles, Jennifer Miller, and Christy Yazvac. This is the STEM alumni panel, and you are listening to Career Conversations. With that having been said, we've had some wonderful tie-ins. We'd maybe like to ask one more question that's along the lines of, you know, what's one piece of advice or one area that you would encourage students to do in reference to networking? So it could be maybe, you know, a word of wisdom or some kind of example that you experienced with networking.
Yeah, networking is so important for students. If employers don't know about you, we can't hire you. So I encourage students to go to all the career fairs, the Career Expo, and get your resume out there on Handshake or whatever platform employers are using, and you know, work with career services and the STEM department to get a co-op or an internship if that is something you want to do.
Thank you.
Yeah, you never know what connection is going to get you somewhere, I think is big. So connect with anybody that you can. That has been huge for me in my career. One thing I will also say is I applied for an internship at Progressive the summer before my master's. I didn't get it. And instead of beating myself up about it, I went to Europe and studied abroad, and it was great. Made a lot of great connections there. Came back 2 months later, they called me in for a final interview. So even though I didn't get it, that still ended up in a job for me. So apply for everything that you can, even if you think it's a long shot. You never know what's going to happen.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think sometimes, we make the mistake of looking at networking like it has to result in a job or it's of no use to you. But I think a professional network, either as a student or in your career, just helps along the way, even if it's tidbits of information or you learn a different learning style. Even, Christy was talking about studying with different people with different skill sets helped her along the way into figuring out some aspects of her career journey. I know for me, I did 2 internships when I was a student at YSU, so one at the University of Connecticut and one at Texas A&M. And Texas A&M in particular, the faculty advisor that I worked for was a brand new faculty advisor, and so I really got that experience of working in a brand new lab. But just seeing his perspective on what starting up a lab looked like was so helpful in both my graduate experience and then also starting out as a faculty member, even though I didn't end up going to grad school at Texas A&M. And even though that wasn't my final career path, it's still someone that was very influential in just learning from them and also getting into grad schools. He was willing to write me a letter of recommendation and, has been part of my professional network as I've continued on. And so, and also staying in touch with people from YSU is how I found out about this current job opportunity. And so I think just being really genuine in your connections with people is really important, because when people know you're trying to connect with them just to get something from them, it tends to just come across in that way. It can just leave a bad taste in someone's mouth. But if it's, I want to learn something from you because you're in a field I'm interested in, regardless of whether it results in a job opportunity or whether I just walk away with a tidbit of information that I didn't know before, I think takes some pressure off you as a networker and allows you to gain more from the conversation and leave a better impression overall.
Yeah, well said, because the idea of networking can sometimes scare students. And, Justin, I think my final thoughts on this before I hand it over to you as we begin to wrap up is I always say don't underestimate the power of an acquaintance, because it has been shown that you're most likely going to get some sort of job or referral through your acquaintances, not your friends, because your friends know the same people you do. So there are places for acquaintances in our life, and that is really where the world of networking sort of lies, is in and through the acquaintances. So Justin, any final thoughts on that?
You know what? I think that's the right way to view it. Networking is about learning. And I think that's the root of making an effective connection. And I think we have time to squeeze in one more question. I'm very excited about this question. It's moderately specific. So I'd like you to envision an experience where a young person, first year at YSU, approaches you and says, I'm interested in STEM. I have no clue what fits me. What quick piece of advice, what snippet of advice might you share with that young person who says, I think STEM is interesting, I might want to pursue a career, I'm not sure what the next step is. What would you say to that young person?
I would actually suggest talking to our STEM professional practice office and look into internship, co-op, shadowing opportunities just in a field that you're interested in, because I think the hands-on aspect is the best way to figure out where am I sort of interested, where am I sort of not. And even if it's not a formal position, they have contacts at various companies in various areas where maybe you could just hop on a call with someone and ask them, hey, what do you do every day? What does your day-to-day life look like? And that could even give you some ideas of the general area you may want to land.
Yeah. And even just talking through those ideas with people like Quan, people like Sherry over in STEM Professional Services, great people over there to help with those conversations. And then get those further connections set up.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a perfect piece of advice. Also, you have time. STEM's great, highly recommend it, but you have your whole life ahead of you still. And I know it's really easy to feel the pressure when you're 18 years old for people to tell you to pick what you want to do. And You don't have to make that life decision so quickly. You have plenty of time to talk to people, shadow people, and try to not make a decision just because you feel pressure. Try to make it because it's right for you.
This is a great question for me because I actually have a daughter who is a senior who's planning to come to YSU next year, and she's very interested in chemistry, so I'm going to tell her to speak with our panel. But I think just job shadowing is so big as for a new person. I hope my daughter will do some job shadowing soon before she gets too far into her coursework, just so she can kind of see what she likes and doesn't like, because she also kind of was interested in pharmaceuticals, being working with pharmacy type work, and I think she's kind of steering away from that now and maybe leaning towards chemical engineering or something in the chemistry field. So yeah, job shadow.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And you've been listening to Career Conversations, a YSU podcast about career choices and the unexpected changes that we make along the way. My name is Carla Matusi, and I'm here with Dr. Justin Edwards. And we would like to send a big thank you out to Bill Ruggles, Jennifer Miller, and Christy Yazvac for joining us today here on the campus of Youngstown State University in Kilcawley Center. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was great.
Welcome.
Thank you all for being here.